want to talk about instruction, and I want to talk about it in a rather particular way. And I like to start off thinking about instruction by talking about what I think we're really doing when we deal with kids in schools. We're gambling. We don't know whether something's going to work or whether it's not going to work. But we have ideas about probabilities of different things. And we like to talk about in education, like I think most other fields, evidence-based practices and research-based practices and effect size and all this. But I think it's real important for us to remember that not all evidence-based, research-based practices are equal. Some are better than others. They all have some evidence that they work, but I always like to take it back to a gambling analogy. If someone said to me, "You'll win $1 million if this teacher is successful in teaching this kid this thing," and then they said to me, "And you can tell the teacher how to teach it," well, I wouldn't say, "Here's the funnest one," or "Here's the hardest one," or I would say, "Which one gives us the best chance of a success?" But it might depend. Some might give you a good effect, and some might give you a slightly bigger effect, but take longer. And sometimes efficiency is more important. The longer a kid goes without progressing to the extent we want, the less likely it is they'll ever progress. That's a sad fact. So efficiency might be of utmost importance. Another time we might look at this and say, well, this one works best, but what we know is when you're dealing with kids of this age with these issues in these places, this one actually is a little bit better. Sometimes you might say they both give really good effects, but one is slightly more likely to work than the other. Or they're both equally likely to work, and when they do, one gives you a bigger effect than the other. All of these are things we would take into account. So big idea here is there's no such thing as a sure thing. We don't have any practices that we know for a fact work with every kid. We don't have any practices that we know will work every time we try them. But you can hedge the bet. So if you're gambling and you draw, we're playing blackjack, you draw 2 face cards. You could hit and hope for an ace. But it seems like a bad idea. I mean, if you've bet $1 million, you're probably not gonna hit on the 2 face cards, because you know we can create probabilities by our actions. It's the same thing when we're teaching. I don't know for sure what will work, but I want to maximize my bet. I want to maximize the probability of that student being successful. And we know more or less what those things are that'll do that. And so I'd like to spend our time today talking about and hopefully demonstrating some of that to you as we go. So let's start with what we know. And I'm going to just go to the biggest ideas we've got. John Hattie, who many of you may have heard of, and his book, Visible Learning. Long story short for John Hattie. He goes out and finds every study you can find on a given intervention. So if it's positive feedback, they will go and comb the literature, they'll look for dissertations, they'll find every study they can find, and they'll put all of those kids from all those studies into one big thing that they call a meta-analysis. That they can compute what's the likelihood and how big of an effect would you get from that, which then allows you to compare. This one has this likelihood with this big of an effect, but most of the kids studied were kids like this. This one has an effect like this with this likelihood, and now you can say, given what's out there, this one makes the most sense for me if my $1 million is riding on this. So John Hattie went and did that for all of these things, and we're going to talk a lot about those pieces. But what he does is he's built this, I call it a barometer. And notice that 0.4 is right in the middle, and here's why. Because what John Hattie has demonstrated is that if you just put a kid in school for a year and don't really do anything special, they're going to grow about that much. We'll say an effect size of 0.4 means 40% of a standard deviation. So here's what John Hattie's saying. If you know a kid's going to grow this much by having a pulse for the year, we would like to choose things that give you more than that. If you pick an intervention that gives you a good effect of 0.4, it will be invisible. And that's why the title of his book is called Visible Learning. We want to pick things that make a difference that we'll be able to see. Now, this is a book that was published in the 80s based upon a bunch of research that was done in the 1970s. A lot of stuff that I cited in my dissertation way back when. This was written by some famous education researchers, David Berliner, Jerry Brophy, Tom Good, Barak Rosenshine, and others. And what they had done is they'd gone out and looked at thousands of classrooms. And they just did observations and they measured how much of the time are the kids paying attention, engaged? How much of the time are the kids achieving? How much of the time are the kids having problem behaviors? And they noted what the teacher was doing. They just noted all these things. So then they analyzed these, I think it was 5,000 classrooms, and they asked this question. What are the teachers in classrooms with lots of engagement, lots of achievement, low behavior problems doing that's different from other teachers? And they came up with a list. And in the 70s, it was called the Effective Classrooms Literature. Here's what I find interesting. The list of things that I took from that research from the 1970s is pretty much identical to the list of things that John Hattie has found in research. So, John Hattie published in 2010. I think he's revised that even since. There's nothing new here. Everything I'm going to tell you about is something we've known for at least 50 years. I'm going to show you a video at some point here from 1966 to show you we knew this then. We don't do these things in our field, but we know what they are. We've known how to raise the probability of kids' success for a long time. So I'm going to start with a video. This is a real video from a real classroom. Here's the setup. I'm asked to go to this second grade classroom and watch a little boy who's supposedly has problems. He doesn't do anything interesting, and I gravitate toward looking at this little girl. They're at their desks working independently while the teacher moves around. I notice that she keeps getting up. So she's not doing anything at her desk. She's staring, she's looking around, and then she walks over to a bookshelf, supposedly, although what she's doing really is holding the books and talking to the person sitting near the bookshelf. Until her teacher sees her and says, "Get back to your desk, get working." She goes back to her desk and she kind of stares around for a while. No engagement. She gets up. She wanders over to a table, starts talking to these other kids until the teacher notices again and says, "Sit down, get out your pencil, and get busy." So she does. She goes back to her desk. She sits there for kind of a minute looking at stuff. She pulls out this pencil and she starts looking at this pencil. And I felt like I could just see the light bulb go on over her head. I'm going to need to go sharpen this pencil. So, sure enough, she gets up and she walks over to the electric pencil sharpener and begins sharpening. And after a bit, I'd never had this question enter my mind before. How long could one sharpen a pencil? And she just kept on sharpening, just kept on. But she was talking to people and sharpening. The electric pencil sharpener allows for multitasking. You can sharpen and chat with others. So after like 30, 40 seconds, I thought, this is gold. I got to get this. So I pick up my phone and start capturing. So you're going to start watching this when we're at least 30 seconds into her sharpening. So I show this to students at the university and say, that are usually classroom management students, I say, watch what's going on. I don't tell them this backstory in all depth. I just say it's independent work time and she's not getting much accomplished. What do you think this teacher should do different? So take a look. I ask my students, what would you do if this was your classroom? And I think they're thinking about this, and these are the answers I get most often from them. She should have a pen. You don't have to sharpen that pen. She should have a sharpener at her desk. We need a better pencil sharpening routine where she has a chance to go do that. She needs multiple pencils at that desk. And all of those have a thread of logic in them, but I don't think her problems have anything to do with writing utensils. To me, this is an engagement issue. It's poor instruction. If she isn't interested and nothing's there to make her interested and no one's there to have an engagement with her, she'll find something else to do, and that's our problem. That's what I want to focus on today. What do we have to do in a classroom with kids that probably aren't that interested in what we're going to teach to keep them engaged, to make instruction work? And we have a technology for doing this. It's not new. This is a technology that was developed 60 years ago or so, and it can be compartmentalized into a set of basic steps. You maximize the probability of student success when your instruction looks like this. And think about what each of these things means. So number one, we tell the student what we're doing, how much of it we're doing, and why we're doing it. And what that why part means is we're going to have to connect this to your life. I think of this as being really related to the culturally responsive practices. What that means to me is when I'm talking about X subject and we're doing this thing, I have to make that real for you. Why would you care? But I'm also going to connect it to where were we yesterday? And you were really successful yesterday because the instructions set you up to be super successful. That's why we're doing this today, which will allow you to do this tomorrow. But it can't be, get out your books. Why? Because the principal said we need to do this. That's a bad answer. It has to be because it's really good for you. How are we going to make it sound good for them? That's a trick. You've got to know your kids. You've got to find a way to get them and grab them. What's your trick for making them care? But they need to know what we're doing. And my first job teaching, which I'll talk about more, was working in a lockdown facility with 8 adjudicated 14 to 18-year-old boys. They didn't care about anything that was on the curriculum. I had to work to find things that made it interesting for them. Otherwise, they would have just vetoed everything. Nope, not doing that. So you've got to find your in, which again is where I kind of think of this as culturally responsive, which really means know your kids and make it fit who they are and where they're from and what's meaningful to them. Second, show them what we're doing and how to do it. Model it for them, demonstrate it, and while you're modeling and demonstrating, talk about it and ask them what they think. You don't want to just say, all right, shut up and watch me for the next few minutes while I demonstrate. It's got to be, I'm doing this. Why do you think I would do that? What would happen if I didn't? And you've got to engage through every step of this. During number 1, during number 2, it's going to be me and you as a group doing all kinds of things together. And this is a big part of I think the error of a lot of instruction is that the teacher thinks, I will be on stage for 10 minutes and you watch and then you'll do. A lot of our kids aren't going to watch for the 10 minutes that you're on stage. We have to go get them. And we have to bring them along with us. 3, don't just say, now you know, go do it. we used to call this scaffolding, guide practice. So, okay, let's say you're out and you're going to do this. What would be the first step? And I might give you some reminders and prompts, and you say it, and I go, exactly right. This is still practice. You're doing it, not me. But I'm facilitating, and I'm setting you up with more and more repetitions so that I can eventually take a step back. And what I want to do is take a step back and have you doing more and more of it with me not reminding you, but still saying, man, I'm impressed, you're good at this. And then at some point, I want you doing this without me. But it starts with me and thinking about you. How do I bring you into this with me? So, how do we do that? How many people in here have ever heard of project follow-through? Okay, nobody ever has. And here's why you should. It, to this day, is the most expensive ever federally funded research project in education. It spent $1 billion and studied 20,000 students nationwide. It started in 1967. Here's the question. The United States Department of Education said, is there a best way to provide instruction to kids if we want them to have achievement? So what the government did is they set up sites in low-income neighborhoods in major cities across the United States. Dallas, San Diego, Chicago, Baltimore, etc. And they took applications. Do you have a method of instruction? Show us your data that you believe your method of instruction will work better than others. Here's what we're going to do. We will assign you to go to these different cities. It will give you a bunch of kids. We'll assess them. You'll teach using your method, and we'll assess everybody at the end and see what the comparisons look like. It wasn't 1 year. They went 20 years. But they did an analysis of their data, I think it was after year 12. So here's what happened. The government said, we're going to test for achievement. A couple of those, they were mostly universities, said, we stipulate right up front, the kids in our instruction won't achieve necessarily better than other kids, but that's not what's important. What's important is cognitive problem solving. So the feds threw cognitive problem solving in as a measure. 3 of the groups said, we'll stipulate that our kids that are in our method aren't going to achieve as much and probably aren't going to have problem-solving skills, but they'll have better self-esteem, and that's what's important. And I've always think that's a really illogical way to think. That our kids won't know how to read at all, but they'll feel good about their ability to read. But the government said, we'll throw in the self-esteem inventory. They gave this to there were 9 different groups, and they said, go. Here is the official data published on this in the 80s. So the solid bar is academic achievement, the checkered bar is cognitive problem solving, and the slashed bar is self-esteem. Those are the 9 groups. Notice that only one of them had improvements in all 3 areas, and that same group had the largest impact on all 3 areas. Interesting to me has always been that the self-esteem group lost ground in self-esteem over the cycle of this thing. So, the direct instruction group, which was out of the University of Oregon, and full disclosure, I am out of the University of Oregon, but this is way before my time. What changed in the world when this was published? Nothing. The people that liked direct instruction from the beginning stood up and cheered. The rest of the people said, well, I'm not doing that. And everybody kept right on doing what they always did. And it's pretty much been that way ever since. There hasn't been any study that's shown this to be different than this in any way. Again, we know it from John Hattie, we know it from others. But what I think we need to think about is, what is that logic? It's what I just talked about. I'd like to play that logic out for you today. We'll do some activities back and forth. But I want to start you with 1966. So Siegfried Engelmann, interesting guy. He was at the University of Oregon. He had a bachelor's degree. He worked in Chicago, and he worked for an insurance company, and they asked him to test out how many times and how you would teach kids to escape a fire. So he started playing with different ways to give examples to kids and realized that if you did it in a certain way, you got better outcomes. He went to the University of Illinois and talk to the special ed people and say, I want to show you this data. And so they started working together, and he developed what they called direct instruction. And all of his first models were done in inner city Chicago. 1966. These are kids that he's been teaching in a kindergarten for a year. So 5-year-olds, and these kids are exactly my age. They are kindergarten, and they're in a low-income area. He's been working with them for a year. This video is what he calls them showing off. So this is not an example of instruction. This is an example for him to show what the kids can do. He'll do things wrong on purpose because the kids will freak out and run up there and say, that's wrong, just to show that we know how to do this. You're getting ready to see 5-year-olds doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, geometry, and algebra. We know how to do it.
Okay, let's do a little of these. I'm going to get you right off the bat. 8 plus 2.
10.
8 plus 2 equals 10. Say it.
8 plus 2 equals 10.
What's 10 plus 2?
12.
12 plus 2.
14.
Good. Here's our one. 7 plus 2.
9.
7 plus 2 equals 9. 7 plus 3.
10.
7 plus 4.
11.
7 plus 5.
12.
Okay, that's pretty good, but pretty easy. Wait till you see this one. Are you ready? What if I had something like this? 6 plus, look at that plus, 2. Yay! 6 plus, how many equals 6?
6 plus 0 equals 6.
Sure, so what could I do? Erase that B and... Good. What if I had something as hard as this? 7 plus R equals... Oh, sheesh. Goodbye.
4.
That's it! Yo! 7 plus how many equal 11?
7 plus 4 equals 11.
Yeah, how'd you work that out? You got 7, you want to get to 11. 8,
8, 9, 10, 11.
4. Okay, one more. Here you go. 9 plus... Oh, boy. How many equals... 5 is right. 9 plus how many equals 14?
9 plus 5 equals 14.
You guys think you're pretty tough, eh? Well, I hate to do this to you, but goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Oh, oh, oh. Huh? 8 plus 4?
12.
So I just write it down like that. You made that? Oh, the 10's got to go over here?
40.
What do we have? Oh, 10 plus 30 equals 40. Oh, that funny truck. Yep. Okay, and then what do we got? Yeah, 40 plus 10 equals?
50.
Yoo-hoo! So what do I have up here? I've got
52.
50 plus 2 equals?
52. 52.
So what should I put down here?
52.
52. What's 38 plus 14?
52.
52. Do you want to do one more of those?
Yeah. Can I work?
Oh, I don't know. Do. So I just cross these out and put a 12. Okay, what do we...
So I just chopped this up. It's actually quite a long thing where he's showing this. But the idea is good instruction is something we've known about. And so I would like to spend the rest of our time talking about good instruction. What makes that happen? And we've already talked about kind of the building blocks, but let's dig in a little deeper and look at those. At one time, Zig said to me, my area was behavior, and I was talking about behavior stuff, and he said, if you got good instruction, you don't need behavior management. And I thought, man, I've always taught in a self-contained BD room, so I disagree with that. But then, over the years reflecting on that, I really started thinking, what that means is, it's not just good instruction, but have you engaged your kids? If they're interested and you've made them interested in what you're doing and it's fun and they're getting it right, certainly the probability for misbehavior has gone down dramatically. And I would still say if you work in the self-contained EBD room, that's probably still not 100%, but your probabilities are certainly greater. So let's break it down. To break it down, I'm going to start with an activity. This activity is one where I'm going to teach you a new behavior. The new behavior that I'm going to teach you is called ZOR. It's a really important behavior that you need to know in my classroom. So it's a social concept about how you behave and what you do with your body and yourself. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples. Every example I give you is accurate. If I say it's ZOR, it is, and if I say it's not, it's not. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a big random set of examples of ZOR and not ZOR, and I want you then to tell me what ZOR is. So you're a kid in my classroom. And maybe I told you what ZOR was yesterday, but you weren't listening. So today, you're hearing me talk about ZOR. So this is the classroom. You're all sitting at tables. This is my desk right here, and this is my board. And I move around the room and I talk about ZOR. So here's what you guys need to know. It's really important. Always make sure you're ZOR. Right now, I'm ZOR. Make sure that you are. ZOR is really important. Right now, I'm ZOR. Make sure that you are ZOR. I need to see ZORing from people. Right now, I'm ZOR. Thank you. Good job with ZOR. I see people ZORing out there, and I really appreciate you guys for keeping that in mind today. This is important. Right now, I am not ZOR. This is not ZOR. Right now, I'm not ZOR. This is not ZOR. I'm ZOR right now. This is a good example of ZOR. Good job. Look at this table. They've had problems with ZOR in the last week, and today they are nailing it. I'm ZOR right now, by the way. Okay. Thank you for being ZOR. Thank you for being ZOR. Okay, so when you've had maybe 15 examples or so at least, let's see. I'm going to give you a few more. Maybe I'll start asking questions with them just to see if you're with me. Am I ZOR right now? Yes, I am. Okay. Am I ZOR right now? Yes, I am. Am I ZOR right now? No, I'm not. Am I ZOR right now? No, I'm not. All right. You are a group of bright, educated people who just got 20 examples of a very simple social concept. So, Trent is the new kid in school today. He needs to know about Zohr. So what I'm going to do is have one of you give him an example. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell him why I am not Zohr right now. Somebody needs to tell Trent why this isn't Zohr. There's something about it that makes it not be Zohr. Now, before we go any further, just let me tell you, I take this very seriously. I don't want to hear anybody telling Trent the wrong thing. That would not be funny. You need to tell him what Zohr is. And don't tell me you don't know, because we just did 20 examples and you were saying yes and no at the right time. Who's going to tell Trent? I apologize, Trent. This group is not normally this rude. Trent needs to know what Zohr is. Who's gonna tell him? We're not leaving this room until someone tells Trent what Zohr is. Why are we just shy, or are you not sure?
Come on, this is my first day.
What's confusing you right now?
The latest example you gave us.
The way what?
The latest example you gave us was confusing to me. I thought it was whenever we could see your writing utensil.
Pen.
That was when you were Zohr.
Why would you think that? I never said anything about pen.
Your actions. The fact that when you were not Zohr, we could not see your writing utensils.
So the fact that I happened to walk around with a pen in my hand and holding it up all the time confused you somehow. Okay? Actually, it was meant to. So, normally, yes.
You also said at the beginning to remember that everything that you said that was Zohr is accurate, but we had to believe everything you said. So when you said, what I'm doing right now is not Zohr,
It wasn't Zohr.
believe that,
It wasn't Zohr.
that everything that we had preconceived was wrong at that point.
Right. What I showed you on that last example was a non-example that I didn't give you any context for. It was accurate. Normally what happens is somebody says, I know what it is. And I do this with my class at the university, and they'll say, no, it's pen. Even when I argue, I say, no, it's not. Yes, it's pen. I made this up. I know what it is. It's not pen. But they've got it in their mind because they've watched me do weird things with my pen, and it's just gone over and over in their mind. This is like, we're done. We know what this is. So it becomes really hard because I've not ever told you. And I hear this all the time that, well, the kids know. Did you teach them? You don't have to teach them. They know these things. Do they? Or do they have a grasp of part of it, but they don't really have a clear clarity of what this is, why we do it, how it fits in? It's just become kind of a weird thing that these adults make us do for whatever reason. So let's go back and look at this again. Here's the very first example I gave you. I did this on purpose. This is the very first example I gave you. I said, this is Zohr. Here's the last example I gave you. This is not Zohr. What is this? It's my desk. I'm not Zohr here, but I am here. Where is Zohr?
This side of the desk.
You need to be on this side of my desk. Okay, so with two examples that are put right together, that is a little bit clearer. But when I show this one, randomly show a bunch of others, and then come back to here, not clear at all. Every time I gave you a no, I was standing behind the desk. But because I never gave you a context for that, I mixed it up enough that you didn't notice. It's a very simple rule. Stay on this side of my desk. And I could teach it to you really simply by saying, we want to keep some private things private, and I keep them back here, so here's the rule. In order to respect other people's property, let's all stay on this side of my desk. We'll call that Zohr. So if this was my first example, right now I am Zohr. What's relevant about what I'm doing right now? Standing on this side of the desk. Everything else I'm doing is irrelevant. And what Zig Engelman taught us is your next example should change as many things as possible except for the rule. So I'm standing up, pen in my hand, facing that way. Where should I be and what should I do in the next one? I'm going to go to the back of the room. I'm going to have no pen in my hand. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to face this way. So anybody here who was thinking any of those things can rule it out on the very next example. Then I should think, where might people make an error? My next example is going to get rid of that thought. But I'm also going to be telling you, notice right now I'm Zor, and the only reason is because this. Use my words while I'm doing the modeling. But there's a way of thinking out what those examples need to be in order to get that. So years ago, when I was a teacher, I would come into the building every morning, and there was this kid on my caseload who was very low incidence, low functioning kind of kid, and I would just go say hi to him every morning. So every morning I come walking in the building, I go right into this room and say, "Hey Kevin, how's it going? Good morning." And at first he just looked at me, and then he started saying good morning back to me. And as the months went by, he said good morning to me before I'd say it to him. And this is I lived in Bend, Oregon. So, first warm spring day of the year, I go walking into that classroom, I look right at Kevin, and he says, nothing. And I say, good morning, Kevin, and he looks at me really puzzled. And so I went and sat down, I said, why aren't we saying good morning? And he says, you're not wearing the coat. And it occurred to me, I never taught him what good morning is, when we do it, why we do it. And in his mind it was, when that weird guy with a coat shows up, you're supposed to say good morning. I go to my office, hang up my coat, I see him the rest of the day, he never says it. Poor instruction. I made assumptions about what he was thinking when we saw things without thinking out what should the examples be. So as we do this, think through what we know. These come right from John Hattie's book. So these aren't my idea, these are meta-analyses. So, the fact that direct instruction has an effect size of 0.59, so what? What does that mean? Is that good? There isn't good, is there anything better? What's the best we've got? And the clear answer here is, we don't have any other method of teaching that gives you anywhere near that effect size. As soon as we do, that's what I want to do. But right now, we've got the evidence. This is based on a meta-analysis of 42,000 people. So we also know this. Breaking things down into small steps and teaching the steps, teaching the pieces, and adding them up later is a really high probability for success, especially with kids who don't have a history of being successful. If I'm saying I'm not going to say good job until you've mastered the whole problem, you're not going to go that far. 2 days of failure and it's like, screw this. I have to make you successful at a rate of at least 80% every single day I teach. And again, there are plenty of kids out there that would do this without that, but there are also plenty that won't. Breaking it down is a high leverage practice. And I know that's not fashionable. I hear all the time, you can't break things down, they need to be taught the whole. I wish that we could do that, but so many of our kids need to have a success with a component every day. My job is to make them successful, and my job is to say, see where you were, see where you are, see where you're going. Tell them how this is all gonna be put together for them. And finally, we also have the opposite. That the things we do that are based on teaching the whole, people do them, they're really popular. The evidence for them isn't there. And in fact, the evidence from John Hattie's work says these things actually give you less of an effect than you'd get by not doing them. So I think we have to think again about logic and probability. I try really hard to think of this and divorce myself from things I know and things I like and go back to, if there's something that gives me a bigger effect, that's the way we got to go. To me, that's responsible to the kids that I work with, that we give them the best chance we've got. Not what I'm most comfortable with, but what we know gives them that best chance. So there's 3 pieces we're going to work on. First one we call explicit. Another word for this in the special ed high leverage practice literature, this is called clarity. And the big idea is going back to what we talked about earlier. Do the kids know what this is, how it connects to where we've been and where we're going, and are we using a range of examples that'll help them get it because they're real to them? This is where I fall off on using textbooks a lot of times, is the textbooks are using examples about things that our kids don't have any context for at all. So I want to go in and know, who are my kids? Where are they from? Where would this make sense in their world? And sometimes that's a stretch. I had to do a substitute as a physics teacher in a sophomore class in a pretty rough area of town in Louisville, and the why do you need to know about the Doppler effect was a hard one to do. What we did is we used an example first of putting a phone in a bag, and you'd have to know what the Doppler effect is, but swinging it around your head and make the pitch change. And all the kids are like, why do you have a phone in a bag? Why is it making that noise? There's my end to say, I'm going to tell you how. But you got to find some way to grab them and bring them along with you. Second, it's our job to engage the kids. And I've heard people say, I'd love to engage the kids. They don't want to be engaged. But it's our responsibility. If they're not being engaged, then we got to figure out a better way. What's your trick? What's your thing to make them interested? And I'm not saying that I've been successful with this 100% of the times, because there have been kids that I couldn't engage. But it was always my responsibility to keep trying to find that way to get the kids engaged. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. And lastly, we need to say, you did it right or you didn't do it right. And what we know is if you can create an environment where they get it right 80% of the time, which if you look at it as a ratio is 4-to-1, we have a really high probability of keeping it going. But if I'm breaking instruction down into small pieces and you aren't successful with it today, you probably aren't going to want to keep going tomorrow. I have to figure out a way for you to get something that we can hang our hat on and go, look what you did. Now you're going to really have an easy time with this next step, but you've got to get that. And the other thing I think hurts us as teachers is we think, but I don't have time. I've got to go on to the next step. And I understand that, but it's really a problem because we need to be looking at kids in terms of growth rather than meeting a standard. You've got to keep growing. And saying you didn't grow on that step, but we got to move on, that just, to me, doesn't make any sense. But I know we get stuck in that. So let's take this logic of those 3 things. I want to show you a study. What we did was, and I'll show you a little bit more about this later, we went out and we watched teachers. We go in the classroom, we stand in the back, and when they start teaching, when they say, here's what we're doing today, we start coding what they're doing. We only watch until they get to the part where they want the kids to start doing it. So, I'm introducing the lesson, I'm telling you what we're doing, why we're doing it, how it's done, I'm showing you, I'm modeling, and then when it gets time for you, we stop. I want to know what the instruction part looks like. Now, practice is part of instruction, but I just want that core. So we watched, this is based on about 7,000 observations of teachers, and we watched to what degree did they, and this is a duration, percent of time that they spent actively talking to kids. We counted the number of times they actively gave the kids an opportunity to respond by saying, tell me what you think. Draw that and show it to me. Tell your neighbor how you got that. Thumbs up if you agree. We call those opportunities to respond. And third, we counted the number of times they said or gestured something positive. So now what we've done, we've got 7,000 teachers worth of Three things. We do something called a latent class analysis, which allows us to say how many distinct type of teacher are there in the world if you're only talking about these three things. A latent class analysis gave us three clusters, which you can think of as high, medium, and low. Now you can use that to predict kid behavior. Here's what we found. If I go into a classroom and watch a teacher teach for 10 minutes, if they're using these three things combined in the lower third of all teachers, stop right now and predict. The kids in that room are 27% more likely to be seen as off task and 67% more likely to have a disruptive behavior. There is no better predictor of kid behavior that we can find anywhere on anything. Nothing predicts it better than what the teacher does during instruction. Now, I'm not saying this predicts what they do when they're not in instruction, but when they're in that instruction, nothing is a better predictor of their behavior than the teacher's use of what we would call the tenets of effective instruction. So, next, we have to think about how we organize what we teach. It cannot be random. We have to build off yesterday to today and tell them where we're going next and why. This is a brain model of learning, which is a great article, by the way, but just think about it like this. As you learn, all of the information goes into your long-term memory. And when you learn important things, you have a place to put it. When you learn unimportant things, what the research says is it generally runs out of your memory in 30 seconds or less. So when I say a random rule to you as a kid, if you don't know where to put it, you're lost. It goes away. So I say, walk in the hall. If this doesn't connect to anything I've said before, all she's thinking is, man, he's crabby. Oh, he's trying to boss me around. The walk in the hall part's gone. If I want you to know walk in the hall, I have to give it a connection. So here's a good example. Nobody sat down and taught you flat tire 101, probably. But it's salient to you when you've had a flat tire, so you have a flat tire folder up there. And when you have a flat tire, you go to that folder, and inside that folder is, do I have a jack? What problems do I have with jacks in the past that I've learned from? Many of us it's just AAA, what's the number? But you've got a place to go. Where do you go for don't run in the hall? It doesn't connect to anything, it's gone. So what we want is to create a folder. Think of this like a computer. These are folders. Folders make it efficient. What if I told you on your computer, you're not allowed to use any folders anymore, ever? No folders at all for any documents or applications or anything. Most of you have 20,000 things on your desktop now. And then I say, hey, remember that thing you wrote a couple years ago? I don't remember the name of it, but I think it happened in this class. You've got to search through all of those random documents to find it. How long will you try if there's 20,000? Moreover, if I were to ask you to do that all the time, what incentive would you have to flip me off so I would have you leave my room right now? We have to create these folders, and the way we do that is we make those connections. So, for instance, in PBIS, we have asked schools to create these big ideas like be respectful, be responsible. You know why? Anchored instruction. Because no one's going to remember the 85 rules that you've developed for the school. But if I say, what does it mean to be respectful of other people? And I give you an example and we discuss it. And then I say, so what kinds of behavior should we have in the hallway? Notice what I'm doing is I'm teaching behavior. But this isn't what we do. We go, shut up, listen, here's 5 rules for the hall. You don't hear the algebra teacher doing that, I hope. Shut up, listen, here's the 5 rules for algebra right now. Go do it. we aren't teaching behavior. We aren't using that logic. And I even think the schools that have those posters just put up a poster and then go right back to doing what they always did, rather than saying, I'm going to teach in the anchors here. We don't teach every word in the dictionary. We teach a set of rules. We don't need to go through and go through the handbook, code of conduct, and read all the things to the kids. Teach them based on the context of where we are. So, let's take that logic and do another activity. In this activity, I'm going to teach you something again, but this time, instead of giving you bunches of examples, I'm going to give you a few, but I'm going to give you a little more context. So, we'll start with discovery. Now, I hear people say this to me now and again. I don't really need to use this on my kids because they're all bright. Okay, well, you're all bright, so I'll use that logic of discovery, that you'll like it better if you figure it out on your own. Something for which there is no evidence, but I hear it all the time. So I don't want to step on your feelings. I'm going to let you figure this out on your own. This is called colorful geometry, this class. And what we're learning today in colorful geometry is OSH. And there's your example. So, is it possible that OSH is a green triangle? Could be. Is it possible that OSH is a blue rectangle? Is it possible that OSH is a green triangle, but only if it's on top of another color? And I could keep doing this all day, and you don't know what the possibilities are. I'm going to pretend like you're my first group of students I ever had, that you're the 8 adjudicated adolescent boys. Let's do a field trip. We're going to go walk around campus, which has a fence around it, but we're going to walk around campus and look for OSH. So we get up, we walk outside and walk over. Hey, look, it's another OSH. Did you learn anything? It's different. What do you think OSH could be now? Do you have any better idea? Have you been able to narrow it down? No? Let's keep walking. Hey, look over there. There's another OSH. Here's another one. You learn anything? Well, from my perspective as the teacher, we've now done what is OSH. Let's go back to the classroom and we'll do some practice. All right. Raise your hand if you think this one is OSH. Got the first hand was back there. All right. You really think so? Now, you said yes a minute ago. You changed to I don't know now. You do. Okay, let's see if you're right. You are right. Nice job. I think other people are kind of confused. Could you stand up and tell them how you know this is OSH?
I think OSH is a triangle and a square.
All right, you're completely wrong. Sit down. Oh, I forgot to give you feedback. No. Okay. Let's just move on. That is OSH. Here's another one. Raise your hand if you think this one's OSH. Okay, and it, oh, there is some. I was going to say it never fails. Nobody wants to answer after I punished her like that. It is. Do you know why?
Oh, I kind of thought that since nobody else raised their hand.
So your cue wasn't the actual OSH, it was the other students raising or not raising.
Of course.
Okay, let me give you some feedback. Wrong. Okay, now I'm being a jerk. But what do you want, man? We did a field trip, you got to see 3 different versions. We practiced in here. You know, I've done my job as a teacher. It seems to me it's time for a test. So, again, think of those kids that I'm talking to you about and think what might go wrong. Hey, 8 adjudicated adolescent boys. We've done enough with OSH now. At the back table, I've laid out colored paper and some big sharp daggery scissors. What I'd like you to do is to make some OSH. If they have no idea what OSH is, What's the over-under on number of stabbings today? But what can I do? I did the instruction. We did the discussion. What's missing? What do you want from me? $1 million if you can tell me the right answer for Osh next time I ask, what do you want from me? Come on, you want me to tell you? Not gonna. Instead, what I'm gonna do is use better instruction. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna actually give you examples that are teaching examples. Not all examples are teaching examples. Remember what Zig taught us? That first example, whatever it's got in it, everything else has to change on the next example. The problem with my instruction is that in the real world, all the Oshes look the same around here. So I couldn't vary anything. I'm going to need to go and create examples. The real world has all the examples, but it doesn't necessarily give them to you. I'm going to teach you what a dog is. You've never seen a dog or heard of a dog. I'm going to bring you over to my house and I'm going to walk around my neighborhood and teach you dog, but they have to be natural examples of natural dogs in my natural neighborhood. If they were all dachshunds, would you know that a sheepdog was a dog? No, and those were all real examples, but they weren't good teaching examples. We've got to take control of the teaching examples, which is what I'm going to do here. I'm not going to tell you what it is, mainly because I want to show you how powerful teaching examples are. So we'll start here. But what if the next one looked like this? What do you know now that you've never known before? Triangles are irrelevant. Doesn't matter if they're there or not. They don't have anything to do with Osh. Here's another one. Okay, so what you should be thinking is, okay, the blue background isn't anything, but it's also a different shape now. Now I'm going to look across those three and say, what's in common across all three? I should be telling you this and saying, why do you think that one's the same? Why wouldn't I should be engaging you? I'm not doing that because I just want the examples to work. Now I'm going to do the change only one thing, but that one thing that I change is the important part. Let's go back to practice. Oh, look at this one. That's different than anything we've ever seen. Raise your hand if you think it's Osh. I'm nervous, but I'm going to ask. Oh, first. Yes, it is Osh. How'd you know?
Because it's a red four-sided figure.
That is exactly the definition. Red four-sided figure. Great job. Hey, you should take my AP class in colorful geometry.
I should.
You tell your mom that you should, because you are really skilled at this. This interaction we're having right now was brought to you by Effective Instruction. I don't have the ability to do this if she's getting it wrong. I have to think, how do I break this down in a way that will make that happen? Let's do another one. Class, raise your hand if you think this one's Osh. Nobody. Is it because it's too little? Why isn't it Osh? What's missing? The red. Oh, that's right. And I play this a lot of times with the kids. Oh, good catch. I was thinking it was, but you're right. It's got to be two things. Four sides and red. Good catch. I'm giving you credit for something you really didn't even do. But that's part of me making you think, well, I've got this. I know how to do this. How long do I need to do this? Until you're confident that you don't need to do it. So I always am thinking ahead, and like I said earlier, once you do the non-example and kids get it, then my next thought is, what would screw this up? So we're going to do a class project. Every day we do a class project. I need for for you to not have an error when you go there, and I can see it coming, so I'm going to pre-correct it. Let's pretend like my phone is a perfect rectangle. Hey, my phone's a rectangle, right? Is it still a rectangle even if I rotate it? Still a rectangle? Still a rectangle? So, if you're thinking about OSH, which is a rectangle with 4 sides that are red, it really wouldn't matter. So here's what I want you to do. Don't say anything, just think. If you saw this in your project today, would you consider it OSH? Just think. Now what I might do here is say, turn to your partner, your shoulder partner, and tell them, do you think it's OSH? And why or why not? And I could give you a minute or two to do that, and then I'd bring you back. Okay, this group here. Did you both vote? Did you both think it was OSH? Okay, why?
Has the red outline.
She says it's a red outline and the 4 sides. Thumbs up if you agree. Okay, so what I want to do is I want all of you talking and doing, and so I am going to keep that going as much as I can. Those, again, we call OTRs. Now I think I'm ready to let you guys go. I'm still here, I'm walking around, but you're doing it more and more independently as we go. There's no guarantee. Nothing about this is, this will for sure work. But it's a higher probability, which is what we're looking for. Now, when we talk about OTRs, opportunities to respond, and some of you may have seen Todd Whitney's presentation before this one. Todd and I are at the same university and do the same work together. There are all kinds of ways to do it. Anytime you do anything that makes any of the students in your room stop, think about the curriculum in any way, and respond in any way, creates a higher probability for greater success. The more, the better. But certainly there's a limit to how many you can do and still teach and do the things you want. But here's what we've found. People do not use them the way we think they should or could. So again, go back to my little system of 15-minute observation of what you're doing during instruction. We've done this on close to 15,000 classrooms. But in the last year, what we've done is we've broken it down. And I'm going to show you some of the data here. This is from that many different teachers that we've seen at those different levels, classrooms we've sat in, means, averages. The evidence we have in the world tells us that during instruction, and this is important, not all day, during that introductory part, 10 to 15 minutes where you're getting everything set up, 3 per minute is where we get a statistically significant increase in active engagement and decrease in disruptive behavior. So we're going to aim for 3 to keep those kids with us. We're not very close. At elementary, less than 1 a minute. At middle, even less. By high school, 1 every 2 minutes. If you think about it, 1 every 2 minutes, and we're going maybe 10 minutes for the instructional part, that's 5. Now that could be good, but never enough. But here's the breakdown we've gotten. So we took and we broke these down, and we now count, not only was it an OTR, but what kind was it? Was it asking a question? Was it a choral response? Was it a manipulative? You had to build something. Was it a draw something and hold it up? Was it a hold it on a card and hold it up? Was it a tell somebody? Was it a... And we code all these different kinds. And here's what we found. At every level, better than 80% of these are asking one kid. And my hunch is, although I don't have this data, my hunch is that we're asking the same 2 or 3 kids. The ones that don't cause a problem when they answer the question. So the other kids are just not being engaged. But I'm really worried even if they were trying to be engaged, because what we know is kids with learning disabilities, kids with behavior disorders, kids from disadvantaged backgrounds all tend to have verbal deficits. And that doesn't mean don't talk to them. But it means if you're putting them on the spot in front of everybody with a question that they have to verbally respond to, it's more aversive than anything else. And so we're not using these often, and when we do, I'm afraid we're using them in ways that might actually turn kids off, which concerns me. We have to have a better way of thinking about how do we engage kids. And this is a study that we did a few years ago. So my initial question was, how many elementary schools are there in the state of Kentucky that are Title I, high poverty, and were distinguished, the highest rating on the state reading assessment? So out of all the schools in Kentucky, there were 12. 11 of them agreed to let my team of observers come in and sit in every single classroom and code what the teachers did during instruction. Then I matched a sample of 11 high poverty, low achieving readings, low reading achievement schools, same demographic size, etc. And we went and watched every one of them, every teacher in every one of them. This is something called a hierarchical linear modeling, and long story short, what it tells us is the only thing significantly different between this set of schools and this set is the number of group OTRs provided. Group OTR means everybody gets a chance to respond. Everybody shout out the answer. Everybody hold up the fingers. Everybody group. Here's how big it was. The average kid in a high achieving poverty school gets more than 260 additional chances to respond during instruction per week. That's a lot of engagement that they're missing in those other ones. Nothing else is significant. You can't account for it with anything other than that, and that is a teacher variable, something that we control. We have control over that and how we do it. If you think about student engagement, this is what we found. So this is green elementary, blue middle, red high, actively engaged, which means they are doing something. They're talking, they're writing, they're something. Passively engaged means their eyes are open, they're looking in the general vicinity of the teacher, or they're reading. Reading when they're supposed to be reading. Off task, you all know what that means. So what we're seeing is, and again, this is only during that first 10 minutes, but the majority of the time at most of those levels, except for high school where off task goes up, they spend more time staring than they do doing. And what we know is when active engagement goes up, achievement goes up, disruptions go down. So this is a problem for us to see this kind of data that says we're not doing enough of what we need to keep kids with us. Here's the misinterpretation I think people get out of this is, we've got to give them more work to do. This isn't work. This is discussion. Turn to your neighbor. You two build one of those and tell each other why you did what you did. I'm going to walk around and I'm going to give you 1 minute. Everybody, there's just a million ways to do this, and they only need to happen during that small period within each instructional lesson. But we're not seeing those things happen right now. Let's go back to positives. Saying something when they do it right. This sign here I found on the internet, I don't know where it's from. It says, "Thank you for noticing this new notice. Your noticing it has been noted and will be reported to the authorities." Ridiculous. Of course, to me, that's what I think of when I think use positive feedback in a school. Wow, I noticed you. You did that right. Good for you. I'm impressed. That's it. That's all we're talking about. And yet every time I'm somewhere and talk about using reinforcement, everybody thinks that we need M&Ms. Points, tokens, goodies. I don't have a problem with using those things if that's what you want to do, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, you got it right, I told you got it right, you feel good about yourself because you got it right, and because you're getting it right, you want to do this again tomorrow. Affirmation. And you know, good teachers are good at giving affirmations with a smile. A raised eyebrow, a thumbs up, a pat on the back. We always talk about behavior-specific praise. You did that thing right, and we want that. But that doesn't mean everything has to be like that. We can still be giving feedback all the time in such simple ways. So if you ask teachers, and I mean all teachers, myself included probably, how many times during the average class do you say something positive or give a gesture positive to anybody? They'll generally say, probably 5 or 6 times a minute. Well, we have the data on that. It's not 5 or 6 times a minute. It's this. Those are extremely low numbers of feedback. Even at elementary, even little kids, 0.16 times per minute. So that's like once every 6 minutes or something. That's, when you think about little kids, and no more than once every 6 minutes during instruction when we're doing something, do I say or gesture anything positive? We don't do this. We as a field in education, the effect size of positive feedback is 0.97. It's gigantic for saying thank you, for saying yes. We don't do it. These are anemic numbers. The ratio's not that bad, but a ratio of 100 to 1, if it's 100 times every 100 years, doesn't make any difference. It's too low. But the ratio gets out of whack. Here's 1,983 classrooms, high school classrooms we looked at. Random classrooms that we walked into in different schools. The average kid in a high school classroom will hear negative as often as positive. When I've had this discussion at times with the high schools, they've said, yeah, well, those kids aren't doing anything right. Then that's a teaching problem. If you're saying they're saying 2 + 2 is 5 every day, then you're going to need to teach that differently. It's not working. When it's not going the way we want, it's always a teaching issue. It doesn't mean we're bad teachers or bad people or anything like that. It means it's our responsibility. And we have to go with the probabilities. And when it's not there, you got to change to get a probability. We're going to start with those big things, but we don't know where we'll end up. So when you think about positives, I think about them in levels. Level 1, I'm telling you. Or gesturing. It's very simple. What I'd like to point out about this is it's super easy and it's free. I say to adults, use your words. That's what we're doing. Level 2, access to privileges, but it's not what you're thinking. Access to privileges that already exist and that I can frame for you. I thought of this really great example of this when I was watching a middle school kid, and he had this great morning, did everything right. Then the class gets up to go to this computer lab, and this kid gets in an argument with several others about who gets which of the 20 identical computers. And I'm thinking, this kid had a great morning. Take advantage. You should see this coming. Kids are going to argue over computers. You go to the kid and you go, you had a great morning. Tell you what, first pick on computer. Somebody was going to get it. Why not take advantage to give another layer to this kid? He gets another set of, yeah, I did have a great morning. It is free. And these things exist all through the day. I'm not inventing any privileges. I'm making things into privileges that are already there. Level 3, a certificate, a call home, a note home. We've got a lot of schools that we're working with that do Student of the Week or whatever, and they take a picture and put it up. Not every kid wants to be teacher's pet. But the note home that's private, that's almost universal that those things work. And again, these are free. Finally, at the bottom here is token reinforcement. So I'll tell you, every year of my career as a teacher, I taught in a lockdown facility or a self-contained EBD room, and every year I used a full-blown token economy. Two things. I hate the token economy. Second, I would use it again if I taught in the same place. They needed that structure and the ability to provide really frequent reinforcers that didn't add up to a whole bunch right away. But I hated it. I had to keep track of them. You got to have the store stuff there. So I would say, if you don't need those things, don't go there. But if you do, those things work. But they're more work for you. And I don't think they work any better for the average kid than the other things. In fact, I would bet, I would love to study that, I bet you that if you did nothing more than raise the verbals, you'd get a bigger effect than if you did any of the other things combined. Because verbals can be personal. And this is one of the last parts I want to talk about today, which is one of the hardest parts. If you do everything I just talked about in terms of instruction and you manage behavior beautifully and the kids hate you, it isn't going to work. And there's something about a personality, I guess I'd call it the art of teaching. You have to find a way to connect with your kids. If we don't have that, then you could teach a robot to do everything I just talked to you. But a robot wasn't going to work because there's something about this personal interaction that you have with kids that I saw you getting better. And that is really impressive. That's huge. And I can't quantify it, really. I have a whole study I'm trying to do this with, I won't bore you with, but I believe there's so much to the personality part of making instruction work. And I'm of the belief more and more that some people will never have that. I don't know how to teach people to like kids if they don't. So, but I want you to think about how we put those things together. So I'm going to show you a couple of videos. They're really basic, very simple videos. First one is for modeling. So when you're modeling, talk to kids about it. Have a back and forth with them. So we created this little vignette where a kid was driving me insane. All of my vignettes are usually right out of my memory of being a teacher. So here's this kid that's squeaking his desk, and I know he's doing it purposely to drive me insane, by the way. So I want to model for him how to do it. But here's what I want to think about the beauty of this model. When I get done with this model, I have a perfect way to go back and say, stop, here's what I want you to do. Right now, if I say, stop squeaking the desk, he'll say, can't help it. Once I show him how to not do it, when he's doing it, I go, we've talked about this, show me the right way. And I can put it back on him. But I have to make sure I've taught it well first. So this is just a dumb, made-up video. Bob, does that desk have to make that noise?
I don't know, it's your desk.
Well, stand here, I want to show you something. Watch this. If you sit in this desk like this, push this all the way out, and then you can sit here and you can move, and when it's pushed all the way out, then your feet can be on the floor and it doesn't make that noise. See, even when I write. Try it. So it's pushed in. What if it's pushed in? Now push it out all the way. Okay, now right, show me it doesn't squeak, does it? Okay, that's exactly the way to do it. Good job. So instead of stop squeaking, you turn that around to, let me show you how to not squeak. I showed you, I modeled it, I explained why, you showed me that you could do it. Okay, we don't need to have this discussion anymore about does it squeak or not. You know how to do it. If there's a consequence for making it squeak, that was a choice you made because we know how to do this a different way. Lastly, I always like to say if somebody said to me, We're doing everything you just talked about, but there's $1 million riding on this if it works. You can let the teacher do one other thing. You have an idea what that one other thing would be? Reminder. Like, I have told you, we have done this together, we've practiced it, you've done it without me. I get $1 million if you do it today. I can do one more thing. Right before we're going to do that, I'm going to go over and go, remember what we're doing? Remember the first step? Remember the second step? Okay, let's do step 1. I get my $1 million. Reminders. It's cheating. Cheat. Give him reminders. Now, sometimes people go, well, that's not really fair because you're doing it for him. No, I'm not 100% confident that he'll get it right. And if he gets it wrong, it might be what set him off today. I am going to create a success and keep doing that until I'm confident that I can get him. And sometimes it's me tricking him into doing it on his own and then giving him all the credit. And I would always say this. The definition of a teacher is someone who plays tricks and creates these traps and does all these snarly things to make kids successful and then gives all of that credit back to the kid. That was all you. You're amazing. Go home at night, have a drink, toast yourself for what a great teacher you are. You come back to the school, you guys did that, not me. Give the kids back all the credit. So, here's 2 simple things to think about for reminders. Here's the verbal prompt. So let me preface this. This is not a setup. I actually shot this in a real school as it was happening. It's not my favorite example of a verbal prompt, but I want you to notice this teacher, as he greets kids on the way in, and I'll talk about that in a second, is giving them a reminder of what they're supposed to be doing.
Start on the warm-up. Go ahead and get started, Kev. Get started, that's it. Let's get started on the warm-up on the board. Get started on the warm-up. Get started on the warm-up, please. Get started. Get started on the warm-up. Get started on the warm-up. Get started on the warm-up.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, what do you think about that? I'm not completely happy with it, so just what did you notice about it that you would ask to think maybe should be different?
It'd be nice if you greeted them.
It's not that hard to be nice. I'm thinking, great, you greeted them at the door. Did you, though? I didn't see any greetings. I heard reminders. I love the reminder, but where was the, you can do this today. Hey, how's it going? There's a connection missing. The prompt was great, but I'm still thinking the prompt, without the other pieces, I don't think it's going to be nearly as effective. So if I'm coming in and a kid, I feel like he just barked an order at me more than anything, more than a reminder. So I think these things are easy to use, but you have to use them with the personality of a teacher still. Last one, and these videos aren't great for what we're doing, but these ones were setups. That prompts don't have to be big, and I always call some of these the mom look, and think how my mom's 82, and I think if she were in this room and looked at me cockeyed, I'd stop. Good teachers are able to raise an eyebrow, look at something, turn their head just a little bit, and kids know that's what we're doing. You know, my son is 29. When he was a little kid, he would do stupid things, and when he'd say, "I'm going outside," we'd already had this talk, and I'd go, right, you have a brain, think before you act. That prompt. So are there prompts that are nonverbal? And here are, again, really, really basic, simple.
All right, so remember as we're writing down our notes, I want you to work with your table partner, and I want you to remember, talk to each other. What pattern do you notice about the number of valence electrons and the group number? I want you guys to think about it. Think about it first for the next 30 seconds, and then talk with your partner.
We all live in a yellow submarine. Yellow submarine. Thank you. All right, now, who said?
So this last one, loosely call that a prompt, but what she did was, instead of saying, "Why aren't you paying attention? Why is there noise in here?" she used a prompt to get everybody to do the right thing and then said, "Thank you for paying attention," and continued on. So she allowed the prompt to create what she wanted in the room rather than trying to do that with a negative. Do you have to use negatives? Yeah. If you say what's 2 plus 2 and a kid says 5, if you go, "Well, I'm going to be positive today," good for you. You're not, we don't create a better ratio by not saying no when they do it wrong. We create a better ratio by creating higher levels of success. And our prompts and all those things are what we use. But all of these are founded on the instruction part. So in sum, we make a difference. Over and over, we see this in literature. The things that the adults do when they're around kids are enormous predictors for what will happen with the kids. So when we do these things that we have the ability to do, we make a tremendous difference. People that work with kids make a huge difference. I think everything we talk about when we're talking about behavior management, but everything we do in a school, is a bit of instruction. Make it clear. Connect it to them. Talk about where we've been and where we're going. Engage them. Have a back and forth. Have them talking with one another. Give them opportunities to get lots of feedback from you that set them up to be better to do it on their own. That's all just teaching. And finally, some things work better than other things. Use your probabilities. You could say knock it off, or you could give a prompt and get them to do it the right way. One of them gives you a better probability for future behavior than the other. Take the one that gives you your best shot at winning that money that you're not betting, but the way you should be thinking about it is it's a gamble. So, questions? I think I actually went my time today, or this time, so. Questions?